Thank you, Ms. Ada Jones. I hope you can all hear me.
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Great morning, everybody. It's absolutely exciting to be with all of you in real time, though not physically. Thanks to technology, we are able to connect. And this little tiny virus has turned out to be a global teacher, teaching us that we are just a village and that we all need each other. We need to hang together. First of all, I want to congratulate the KCG College of Technology under the leadership of Dr. Annie Jacob Verghese and her team for crafting such a thoughtful webinar over 2 days in order to motivate principals, particularly of schools. It is said that a good teacher informs, a great teacher inspires. And now there is no option but for every teacher to be inspired and to inspire. And it is occasions like this, triggers like this, organized by even higher institutes of learning like the KCG College of Technology, that will spark that kind of change across the broad spectrum of teachers, whether they are early learning teachers, middle school teachers, secondary school teachers, or beyond. And I also congratulate the teaching community, as mentioned in the opening remarks, for being resilient. Behind the COVID warriors, the doctors, police officers, and others, this silent community has taken up the cudgels to keep learning going, and they have adapted amazingly. And the student community has also cooperated in adapting to these vast changes which are not envisaged even 2 years ago. We live in a complex world. It's known by one author characterizes it as a VUCA world: volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. This was spoken of the world even before the pandemic came. And today, each of these dimensions of volatility, ambiguity, uncertainty, complexity has magnified many times. Mankind is facing one of its greatest existential challenges and dilemmas. And this is a time not for resistance, but this is a time for building resilience. It's a time to rebuild our communities, to rebuild the world on stronger foundations so that we will be prepared for even greater challenges. And one of the Philippisms that I wrote and I'm particularly fond of, and Dr. Kiran Bedi said, it's perfect, Philip, when I first wrote to her. Change challenges us, but challenge changes us. Whether this is a pandemic or a plandemic, as I call it, no one can ever say, but we can make it a plandemic. We can plan how to deal with these immense challenges, a much greater challenge than what a third world war would pose. I was telling people yesterday that in a world war scenario, we would not hear of our near and dear, our kith and kin in our immediate circles losing their lives. We would hear of soldiers losing their lives on the front line. But even today, I have heard the sad news of the sad demise of one of my cousins in Bangalore to this deadly disease. And so you can imagine the pall of gloom that is upon homes all over the world. Someone has lost someone, others who's dear to him in his immediate or the next circles. And so this is a time where we are greatly stressed by grief. And instead of panicking, we need to pause and think. We need to build what I call capabilities. In normal times, we need capabilities. But in complex, uncertain, ambiguous times like this, we need to develop capabilities, the ability to cope. And for this, I think Dr. Annie Jacob had a certain reason for inviting ordinary policemen like me to address so many erudite professors. I see the Vice Chancellor of the the university and Pro-Chancellor, my friend Dr. Alex J. Sudasan, former principal of MCC, among the audience. And why is it that you have invited a simple, humble policeman for this task of kickstarting this excellent webinar? Probably it is because you have seen that in my biography that I had suffered a much greater complexity, a much greater uncertainty at an individual and personal level when I was victim to the world's first human bomb or woman bomb in Sri Perumbudur, in which we lost the former Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi. And my lessons in resilience, friends, are not learned from books. It is learned from the bloodshed in Sri Perumbudur. As I lay there, I cried out, of course, first to God. And that is why, teachers, you also need to reinforce your faith in God, whoever He is to you. Reinforce your faith in God. And that is why one of the Philippisms that you would have seen under that portrait of mine, which is a speaking portrait designed by one of my friends, which includes some of the simplest and most brief Philippisms. The last one, I think, says, God is the greatest God. So some of you may say, what is the need of talking about God in an educational seminar? But I would say that the virus has taught us that we cannot factor out G, the letter God, out of our lives, because we cannot understand the complexity of the universe with just the help of scientists, medical doctors, scholars, and so on. There is a vastly unknown aspect of the challenges that we face. On that day, as I set out, as I prayed, I did not know what would be happening that day. I knew there was some dark cloud, but I did not know what it was. And therefore, teaching even students that they need to pray on their own is a skill. It is not just something religious. In my book, I say that I do not believe in religion. I believe in religion. That means spirituality coming alive to meet our day-to-day realities, the challenges that we face. Not something that you put off to a ceremony on a particular day or a particular space or place in our time and life. So in addition to that, the belief makes an ant a giant. As I said, the teachers should not just aim to be good teachers, but they need to discover the greatness in them. A student, after listening to you online or offline, as you would be opening up schools, possibly after this second wave ends its death knell. As every class, there must be some word that a student can take away that would inspire them, some phrase, some thought that would equip them, that would enable them to be resilient leaders. In my book, I wrote that leadership is laddership. Laddership is a word I've coined, which means to provide ladders to enable people to climb to new levels of well-being, wisdom, love, and joy. It is not to enjoy greater and greater comforts, luxuries, wealth, pleasures, because these are poor teachers of human character. Because hardship develops the best leadership. And I believe that out of the throes of this pandemic, global pandemic, and the second wave in India, in this destructive wake, would bloom a new civilization, new hope for humanity. Human beings who are renewed in their vision, that they should not live for themselves, but it is an opportunity given to them by the Creator in order to serve more and more people. And therefore, as teachers, you do not aspire for higher and higher positions in order to add a label behind your names, but with the purpose that you can serve more and more students. As I've written in my book, one should not aim to be an emperor, but an empowerer. The more people you empower, the greater it is. Every day when I am able to speak to people like this, I feel that day has been the most fruitful. As Robert Louis Stevenson says, do not count the success of the day by the number of fruits that you harvested, but by the number of seed that you sowed. As teachers, as principals, as teaching administrators, each one of you have a brilliant opportunity, a great opportunity, a God-given opportunity to sow that kind of life-giving seed of creativity, of service, of love. And it is not mere dry knowledge that you will be imparting, because knowledge by itself is dry and dead. It is only when you combine knowledge with practice, the progenies are leadership and excellence. We need to combine theoretical concepts with practice. I am not excited if I come out with a new idea unless it impacts lives. That should be the approach of a great teacher, of a great educational institution, of an educational administrator. What is the change that we are producing in our students? Yesterday, I wrote that a skiller instinct, not a killer instinct, a skiller instinct is needed in every trainer, educator, and teacher, so that they can mold the material that is placed in their hands. And that material is the living souls of the students who pass through our heads. And for this, we need to build resilience. Resilience doesn't come from mere theoretical knowledge. The transformation will take place in education when we give priority to the right thing in the right place. First things first, as Stephen Covey says. Right now, education paradigm is organized on the pattern of knowledge first, skill next, attitude, if at all it is there, is last. Instead, it should be reorganized as ASK, attitude first, skill next, knowledge last. One of the reasons why educational institutions, including police academies, of which one I am heading, and including the academy that trained us 33 years ago in Hyderabad, the National Police Academy, the focus is on skills. It's on knowledge of laws. But the more skills and knowledge you develop, if your attitude is not right, you're likely to be more a liability to society and to the organization you are called to serve. And therefore, yesterday in my meeting with my team in the police academy, I impressed upon them the need to reverse the order of educational priorities. Attitude first, skill next, knowledge last. What are the reasons why historically humanity has not addressed attitudes as being most important in education is the lack of knowledge of a technology to address it. And that is why even Harvard University does not address attitudes sufficiently. It is supposed to be the mecca of learning to which the whole world turns, looking for wisdom and insight. But it is those managers who came out and led the world into the last recession. And some of them say that even the willful aspect of this pandemic has been planned by masterminds, sophisticated people sitting in world capitals. No one will ever know the truth. And that is why it is a liability to set free students on an unsuspecting society unless their attitudes are transformed. And that's why this first maxim in that picture that you saw, or probably seeing now on your screen, it says, be at it, beat it. This is a technology, a human technology that I discovered in over the last 40 years, my whole lifetime. As a student, I said that I need to find a process which will enable me to be resilient, to be strong, and to get stronger and stronger and stronger, so that I will overcome my own inner fears, my own weaknesses. It is my own struggle over my weaknesses that led me to the discovery of this thought process called EQ thinking, for short, and equilibrium thinking as expanded. And it consists of two tools: be at it, beat it. A very simple monosyllabic statements, but these are the key to the human mind that has eluded Freud and Carl Jung and the ilk. Be at it is the positive aspect of life, improving your abilities all the time. So sharpen the saw, as Stephen Covey said. Keep on sharpening your learning. As educationists, you're all very good at it. You keep on sharpening your saw. You keep on adding to your fund of knowledge and skills. But the second dimension is the new dimension. Beat it, which means beat the negative. How do we beat the negatives that this virus has brought upon humanity, upon India? How do we face these huge challenges of loss of jobs, loss of opportunities? People are not able to be interviewed for jobs. New jobs are not coming up in the market. And so the thought process of humanity has to be tweaked, has to change. It is no longer positive thinking will not help. The previous generation grew up on a diet of positive thinking. But mere positive thinking will not enable a human to overcome the deeply ingrained negatives. And that is why this thought process, be at it, be positive, beat negative. Together they are complementary. And just like failure and success alternate in our lives, when we leverage on our abilities, we achieve success. And otherwise, we sometimes fail. More often, we have more failures than success. And that's why even in this pandemic, we need to learn from the examples of resilience, of heroes of the past, of champions of the past. Henry Ford, it is said, went broke 5 times and failed with multiple businesses before founding Ford Motors. Colonel Sanders of Kentucky Fried Chicken had his secret chicken recipe rejected 1,009 times. Walt Disney was fired by a newspaper editor because he lacked imagination and had no good ideas. Later, he failed in multiple businesses and went bankrupt before Disney. Albert Einstein, the most brilliant of human minds, did not speak until he was 4 and did not write until the age of 7. He was considered mentally handicapped by many except his mother. Thomas Edison's teacher once said he was too stupid to learn anything. He was fired from his first 2 jobs for not being productive enough. And later, after nearly 10,000 failed attempts, he created the light bulb. Winston Churchill, a Nobel Prize winning, twice elected prime minister, struggled in school and was defeated in every election for public office until he became prime minister at age 62. And so you need to prepare students that failure is a part of life and that we need to learn from failure. The roots of success lie in failure, and that is the secret of building resilience. My greatest failure in Sri Perambudur, on my watch, a former prime minister died. And that within 1 year, that sowed the seeds for me to think of a concept called the Friends of Police movement. I said, God has enabled me to join the IPS and enabled me to survive the world's first human bomb for a particular purpose. What is that purpose? So as principals, you need to get in touch with the purpose of your life. Keep asking yourself, what is my purpose? And then go ahead and fulfill that purpose. And I said, my purpose as a police officer is to attempt to sensitize, to transform the attitudes of police personnel, to transform the attitudes of the public towards the police too, because friendship cannot be a one-way street. And as I kept on thinking on this subject, suddenly the idea of Friends of Police cropped up in my mind when I was in my first district as SP within 2 years. And then I made bold to tell the former Chief Minister to extend it to the whole state of Tamil Nadu. And that has led to a transformation of the interface between the police and the public. So you need to define your own challenges. What are the challenges as a principal? What are the challenges the student community is going to face in terms of learning opportunities, in terms of professional opportunities, in terms of resources? What are the challenges your teachers are going to face? And then as you do this creative questioning, the answer will come up from within you. As I've written in my book, genius is 1% intuition and 99% tuition. Yes, you are doing tuition. You're doing education. You're building their knowledge, tuition. But that 1% intuition should not be killed. What is that 1% intuition in your teachers and in the students? What is that creative spark that is unique to that person's soul? Enable that to develop. And that child, that person, that teacher would emerge as an immensely useful, productive person in due course, as it happened with Thomas Edison, Winston Churchill, and so on. Winston Churchill was building that bulldog resilience for decades before he was called to become Her Majesty's Prime Minister. That years of doggedness, his pugnaciousness, and that though he was dyslexic as a student, having a learning disability, he ended up winning a Nobel Prize for literature. And that is how we need to enable. Teachers should not focus on the best students. This has been my complaint against teachers all my life. When I was back in school, in the Christmas play, I would get a role because of my complexion only as a shepherd. And I noticed that only the fair-skinned would be acting major roles. And as I progressed in classes, I found the same kind of, within brackets, favoritism. And that itself became a challenge for me to prove myself that I am better, that I am different. And that's how you need to not dote just on the top rankers. You need to enable the last, no one left behind, the last student, the student with a mental handicap. Les Brown is today known as a great motivation speaker, a thought leader in the West. But back in school, he came from a very challenged background. And he grew up in someone's basement. But his brother was brilliant. And he was a twin, and he was called the dumb twin. And once his teacher called him up forward to solve a particular problem. And he was very hesitant, almost not budging from his desk. But he shyly said, "Teacher, I cannot. I am mentally challenged." The whole class started laughing. And that teacher, with one phrase, turned around this man to be a diamond among human beings. What is that one phrase that teacher uttered on that spot that transformed Les Brown and through him has impacted generations? He said, "Don't let someone else's opinion of you become your reality. Don't let someone else's opinion of you become your reality." And so that is how a teacher, with just a stray phrase, with a challenge that you pose to even the difficult students or the student who is not paying attention, you will find more students distracted today because for months together they have been away from any focus. How do they get them to be focused? So this be added beat it is the foundation of equilibrium psychology, which I claim I have founded. Till now, there existed only negative psychology, positive psychology. And through equilibrium thinking, you have a new psychology, equilibrium psychology, where you build both your strengths and your ability to overcome weaknesses. Not only your weaknesses, but the challenges like Les Brown faced from the environment. Today, the global environment is so negative. And this is the greatest challenge that humanity has faced. The race of Homo sapiens has to live up to its name. Homo sapien, which in my books I said is a misnomer because you can hardly call a human a wise man. But this is your opportunity, ladies and gentlemen, great teachers, members of the noblest profession, people who have produced the greatest of minds. Your mind is your greatest asset. Use it now to build the capabilities of this generation of Indians. I'm glad that you have organized this webinar on this most vital subject. There are lots and lots of stuff that I can talk from my book, but the purpose is not to exhaust the subject of resilience, but to spark an interest. That resilience is, in fact, is the only skill that you need to teach your students. The rest they will pick up, as I told you, all these instances of people who are labeled as failures, who on their own educated themselves. And like that, you need to only spark. As I remember in a debate back in school, we only need to remember that the mind, the human mind, is not a vessel to be filled, but a fire to be kindled. That fire may be kindled by a single expression, by a single thought, by a single gesture of a teacher, by an action of a principal. A principal calling a student who she sees tearful in assembly to her office, and spending time to listen to her. What is it that happened in your life? And when the child breaks down and says, I lost my mother in this pandemic, and my father has lost his job, and I do not know how I'll continue in school. So you need to become emotionally intelligent. It's no longer enough to be intelligent teachers, but an emotionally intelligent community. There are children who are going to grow up as orphans. I've heard just over the last few weeks, infants being left behind by a pregnant mother, a doctor, young children of the age of 3 being left behind by both parents, being taken away by this deadly virus. These children are going to enter your classrooms, and they are going to be suffering from chronic depression, and you are going to be their psychiatrist, their counselor, their healer, their deliverer. And therefore, you need to equip yourself with these skills. Learn these principles of EQ thinking, be at it, beat it. Apply it to yourself, and then you will be able to be a shock absorber. As I wrote recently, first we need to spend time in observing good things, then in absorbing good things, and then we will be producers and shock absorbers in this world. With this, I conclude my keynote address, and I'm always open for first feedback and comments, followed by Q&A, questions and answers.
Thank you, sir. The participants, you may unmute and ask your question, or you may post your questions in the chat box. Sir is participants may post your questions.
Or they can just raise their hands and we can call them out also. Let me start the ball rolling. Dr. Prateep, that was a wonderful, powerful, inspiring speech. Thank you so much for all the Philippisms you shared. It really meant a lot. I just want to ask, would you also share with us one teacher or one or two teachers who made a difference to you? Who do you remember most? And how did they make an impact on students' lives? What did they do specifically?
Well, one teacher back in the 3rd standard, one sentence that she spoke, one proverb, that's why proverbs have such a huge impact in my life. She said that the biggest room in the world, she asked us a question, do you know which is the biggest room in the world? So I ask you that question, which is the biggest room in the world? What is your answer as a teacher?
The mind, is it?
No, Susan, it is the room for improvement.
Oh.
And I realized that improvement so you can keep on improving wherever you are. You may be the dullest kid on the block, but you can keep on improving incrementally. And then back in high school, 8th standard, the vice principal comes into, we used to call him Shivaji because of his short stature and his French beard. And these nicknames also, go a long way with students. And they remember the persona of the teacher. And he said, it was, I think, in those days you had these moral science classes. And he said that aim for the stars and you'll hit the treetops. So I realized that you don't need to have the basic abilities. You just need to aspire. The abilities will follow. So you just need to aim high. The higher you can aim, the better, because you're going to fall just short of it, and which anyway will be far above your own average. And so these are some transformational thoughts. It is not the subject per se that transforms students, whether it's biology or chemistry. We do not remember any bit of it. But what is the impact you leave on the lives, on the heart and soul and mind of the student? That is what they carry all their lives and never set it down.
Thank you, sir. We'll all, we realize that, that our main job is to be emotionally intelligent and to reach out to our students and show that we care about them. That should be our first step.
When I spoke about spirit, this book, why does it have a bulb? Education should be holistic. The bulb contains the cosmos. There's a light bulb that contains the cosmos. So this stands for the spirit, which is unlimited, infinite. The middle segment is the mind, and then the body. Whatever you do should be holistic. Education should not just be about intellect and emotions also, but spirit, mind, and body.
Well said.
So we have a question from the audience. It's a question from Ms. Radha Srikanth. She's asking that today's younger generation, they easily give up their lives, surrendering their dreams and aspirations to suicides. So they have a weaker mental and emotional stability. So where does the error lie? She's asking if it is the error on the student side or their parents' expectation.
Actually, this generation is the ATM generation. So they press a button, they want immediate gratification. And that leads to much lower level of resilience and low self-esteem. And they give up easily. So the one thing that every teacher should teach every student without fail is the famous address of Winston Churchill. He once went to Oxford or Cambridge, and they asked him to give an address. And he stood up and gave just this one line: never, 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 never give up. And that lesson should be instilled in students as at tender age. And then parents too need to instill this. I've heard of parents telling children, "You're useless. Why don't you kill yourself?" In their anger, they don't mean it. And the self-esteem of the student suffers, irreparable damage. So using life skills to develop the esteem, the resilience, the self-belief, all these persons I mentioned, and in my own case, it is self-belief that drives us. It's not as if we had huge advantages in our environment. We had no privileges, but we had to fight all the way. And it is self-belief. That's what I have written in that portrait. Belief can make an ant a giant. And the word giant means God-inspired ant. Even a giant is vulnerable, but a God-inspired ant. I'm so tiny, so puny, so weak, so vulnerable. But when I'm God-inspired, I can take on a Goliath. And the Goliath challenges of our life are God's shortcut to our promotion. This is another Philippism I recall. The Goliath challenges of our life, even of this pandemic, are God's shortcut to our promotion. So we need to infuse that belief in human destiny, in individual destiny, that we are here to fulfill a larger purpose. That is spiritual intelligence, connecting with the big picture, the larger purpose.
Thank you, sir. So out of curiosity, not really related to students, but in this pandemic especially, I would like to know what are the challenges faced by the police department. So we see in any kind of havoc, we see the police department always in the front. So I would like to know what are the challenges that you face?
Yeah, the police, I was thinking the nature of challenges has changed over the last 1 year. Before it was crime. And you know, the crime has completely, the crime curve, while the pandemic curve has risen, the crime curve has declined and flattened. And you know the reason why that happens? Because criminals cannot work from home. And anyway, the challenges for the police are so many. One is to get the public to cooperate and making them understand that these restrictions are meant in their own interest. And that is why one of the principles in that poster says, follow the laws to avoid loss. Follow the laws to avoid loss. So the higher a species is, it follows more laws. And so the more freedom you need to have in life, you need to obey the rules, basic rules. So these lockdown rules, masking rules, these need to sanitize. We need to, the whole country, the police force is facing a challenge right from the chief down. And I see the chiefs are every day taking all the statistics, which normally they should not be concerned with. Statistics of deaths, statistics of hospital admissions, ICU shortages. And they need to even, you know, other day I heard a young boy who's now grown up in Bangalore in our church, and he was on oxygen, and breathlessly he was saying, he was addressing the country's leadership. And he was particularly saying to the police that in this lockdown situation, why don't you think of creating a green corridor for the ambulances to reach a hospital, that I myself had to get down and push down barricades for my ambulance to move. So the police need to become more sensitive to the needs in these changed conditions. It is not preventing crime, which is default happening, or there's no major law and order issues, but to repurpose ourselves to be protectors, preservers of life, and make things a little easier for the suffering public, because everyone is suffering. Students are suffering, they're not able to attend classes, their education is not progressing, teachers are suffering, educational administrators are suffering for want of even fees not being paid.
Thank you, sir. We have a few more questions from the audience. Mr. Sadasivam asks that as a teacher, nowadays his challenge is that have the students become more selfish. Earlier days, teachers were able to bring their students under their love and care and consideration. But now, these days, or this generation, that has become a challenge. He's asking if the students have, from their end, have they become selfish or immature? How can a teacher overcome this?
Yes, the culture of the generation, the morus, they say, the morus, the values have changed, you know, between, say, even if I look at our own children, the values are different. I'm not saying it bad, but it's different. And therefore, we need to ensure that the anchor values, and one of the Philippines I wrote that, you know, the bigger the leadership, whether it's entrepreneurship, friendship, or otherwise, the greater should be the anchor and the anchor chain. So the connectivity with the anchor, they need to have an anchor. So the anchor can be spiritual, the anchor can be moral, the anchor can be great lives. So I spent years studying great lives as a student. That was my passion, studying biographies. How did these guys become great? What is that one passion, that one value that made them so outstanding? So teachers should introduce, that's why economics is an interdisciplinary discipline that I was inspired to found in 2006. And that will address these issues if you introduce it as an elective. This will be one subject where the exam will be life itself. There'll be no written paper or interview, anything. But economics, every student coming in should aim for excellence. Excellence, all-round excellence. Excellence morally, spiritually, intellectually, physically, socially, emotionally, every sense. And so they are introduced to studying how excellence enabled people to achieve goals that they themselves have. And then they'll realize that that is the better route and not this selfish way, not these shortcut methods of cutting corners, of breaking morals, of being extremely selfish. So we need to tweak. So leadership lifting, leaders means you need to lift some from the morass, from the pit in which they have fallen. And some who are climbing, you need to give them a push up. So altruism and all these things are inherent in every student. Ask my children probably do far more than I in reaching out. My one daughter is trying to connect donors, blood donors, through an app to hospitals. And the other one is every day trying to organize ICU admissions, and she, even in the middle of my job, she calls me and tells me to give priority to that. So there are youngsters who have the right orientation. There are others who don't, but it is the parents and the teaching community who have the responsibility to, like a shepherd, to make them turn a little this way, a little that way, after assessing it objectively.
I think we'll just one last question, sir. It's time. So there is Ms. Bharati Lakshmi asking, so during this crisis period, even we, the teachers, are feeling low. All the people around us are struggling, our family, our society. So the teachers themselves are feeling low. So how do we motivate ourselves so that we can motivate the students?
Yeah, as I told you, there was enough content for a whole day, but I couldn't teach you about EQ thinking. You practice EQ thinking, which is basically using self-talk. So ultimately, every teacher, every human being, your deepest thought is self-talk. Self-talk, what you say about yourself within your mind has greater impact than what I am speaking to you. So the simplest possible self-talk is connected with be and beat. Be calm, beat anger. Be joyful, beat sadness, beat depression. Depression will get to you if you don't take some steps like this. So you say it in our inner ear, inner mind. Repetition is required, because Daniel Goleman says the emotional intelligence requires repetition. And so the simpler the self-talk is, the more penetrative and impactful it is. And Dr. Shad Helmstetter, who devoted his entire life to developing an institute of self-talk, says that the more precise your self-talk it is better. So you can even write self-talk. Be calm, beat anger. Be joyful, beat sadness. Be healthy, beat sickness. Be wise, beat folly. Now, these are actually polar opposites made complementary, and therefore it makes you even more creative. Most of my ideas come because my mind works like a dynamo. And you as teachers are more active intellectually, and therefore you keep running this. So this is called ATM, anytime motivation. You don't need a motivational speaker like me or anyone else. The guru is within you, the teacher is within you. You need only a tool, and this tool is EQ thinking. And you connect it with words like powerful words, value-oriented words like love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, humility, self-control, wisdom. 10 digital fingers, 10 values, and its opposites. Never alone, because alternation is required. All of nature, day and night, operates. The heartbeat moves up and down, breathing in and out. You plant a seed, along with it, weeds grow up. So seeding and dewading has to happen simultaneously. So so far in thought process, they have never found a method by which you do both. You either do overcoming negative or reinforcing positive. First time in history of human thought and education, it is brought together in the simple way, be at it, beat it. So you can practice it visually. Some of you are visual learners, so practice it in a mental screen. I am calm. I have beaten anger. I've beaten sadness. You have your own problems that you're carrying. And unless you are able to handle that, how will you handle the burdens of the child I mentioned who had lost her mother? So therefore, you have to be equipped. And therefore, you can practice visually, auditorily, which means you speak it in your inner language, self-talk. And then kinesthetically, right? Even your hand, your movement of legs is binary. When you take a walk, right leg, be calm, left leg, beat anger. People have experienced change over the last 30 years as I taught this thought process. Even people who are, highly erudite people, they found this simple thought process beginning to work in them. And so you can build your strength, your capabilities over, the days. In 21 days, you'll find you'll be far more relaxed person, far more creative person, far more productive and proactive person. In just 21 days of practicing EQ thinking, be calm, beat anger, be joyful, beat sadness, be strong, beat weakness. That's a basic pattern. Be strong, beat weakness. And so this is a simple thought process, which is very complex in its roots. It will impact your every aspect of your life. Even your immunity will improve. Your longevity as well as productivity will improve. And you will renew your own inner mind continually. And it is in your hand. The tool is in your hand. So you can, if you need more content on this, you can go to my website, eqthinking.com. Most of what I have written is there on that website, or you can join a community on Facebook called EQ Thinking. And I also plan to do mentoring when the government frees me on EQ Thinking. And lots of teachers I have been training in EQ Thinking over the last 30 years.